maybe she will want a divorce because I'm not bringing anything to the f***ing table. What's up, everyone? Welcome to Martel Dynamics. My name is Orlando Martel. Today we're gonna start to read a new book, and it's a book that it's not that much read by a lot of men and boys in particular, but I want to try it out because I recently saw a review of the book. The book is Pride and Prejudice by Michael Knowles and Abigail Shrier, I think her name is, and it sparked my curiosity about the book. I couldn't afford the book at the moment, so I took it out of the library of my university and I began to read it. Just from the non-spoiler reviews that I've read, I know that a lot of women like this book because it's sold as if this is a very feministic book, and I had never heard a man before said that it's actually a good book. And then I saw that Michael Knowles video, and I like Michael Knowles, and I got inspired. Abigail Shrier explains in that review that a lot of times when women read this book, they concentrate on how much women have gained since that period in life. But other points that are explained in this book too are all those things that they have lost too. Apparently, the book opens up this discussion of not only what women have won or gained since that era or period in human life, but how much they have lost too by signing into some extremist view of whatever the critiques are that can be found in this book. One other point that motivated me to read it is that a lot of men don't concentrate on talking about love and about their feelings. I know I am that same way. Sometimes that can be detrimental because you can be sometimes so stoic that then it has a negative effect on you when you don't understand relationships, when you don't understand human interactions. And in my opinion, it's okay to be stoic. It's okay to not talking about your feelings all the time. But at the same time, you have to have some grasp of human relations and how women think. And of course, nobody's the same. No woman is the same. No man is the same. But just a grasp on how these interactions between people usually go. I don't know if all the books are the same. The one I have that I got out of the library, it's divided into 3 volumes, and each volume has chapter 1 to 20, and then volume 2 has chapter 1 to 20. For the purposes of this series, I'll just number the chapters like 1 through 100. These videos will be really short because the chapters are really short. Maybe that's for the better because then I can analyze the chapters in more detail or just go deeper. Chapter 1 begins with one of the most interesting opening sentences that I've read in a long time. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. However little known the feelings or views of such a man may be on his first entering a neighborhood, this truth is so well fixed in the minds of the surrounding families that he is considered as the rightful property of some one or other of their daughters. First of all, it's so true. That opening sentence for me is so profound because as a man, it's really hard to provide to your family when you don't have anything stable in your life. I mean, you don't need a huge fortune, but you need a stable life because otherwise what you will pass on to your wife and until your children is the same instability that you have. You know what I mean? I can translate this sentence besides its obvious meaning and literal meaning. Any man with a stable life, stable economic, emotional, and spiritual life will be in want of a woman, of a wife. And even though this novel was written in 1813, I mean, it's still true today. You see a single man, with a good life, he is looking for just a stable life and a stable woman. The chapter begins by introducing us to these 2 great characters that, as of this video, I have read the first 3 chapters of this volume or of the book, and Mr. and Mrs. Bennet are just hilarious. Their fights, their discussions, their arguments are just, Mrs. Bennet is I don't want to say crazy, but Mrs. Bennet is this I don't remember the word I wanted to use, but Mrs. Bennet is it's just all over the place. She has so many things in her mind that, I mean, the book describes her this chapter describes her otherwise, but in my opinion, Mrs. Bennet just has so many preoccupations and thinking of so many things at the same time that she's just driving her husband crazy. Of course, one has to understand the time where this book or the society that describes the book or the society in which this book was written. The man had a very central role in the family. I mean, there's this rich guy that comes into their hometown. Mrs. Bennet wants Mr. Bennet to go and visit him, because she cannot go and visit him because it will look as if it's, not right, because of how the social construct is, how the status quo is. So Mrs. Bennet is just discussing with Mr. Bennet about him going to visit him. She says, "Why, my dear, you must know, Mrs. Long says that Netherfield, which is, I think, the hometown, is taken by a young man of large fortune from the north of England, that he came down on Monday in a chaise and four to see the place, and was so much delighted with it, that he agreed with Mr. Morris immediately that he is to take possession before Michaelmas, and some of his servants are to be in the house by the end of the week." "What is his name?" asked Mr. Bennet, and she says, "Bingley, Mr. Bingley." Apparently, the lifestyle of this man is just very surprising, because she says that he makes 4,000 or 5,000 a year. What a fine thing for our girls. So apparently there are 5 girls. They have 5 daughters. This Mr. Bingley makes 4,000 or 5,000 a year, and out of curiosity, I googled how much $5,000 were today, and it's something like $160 something thousand per year, which in today's standards, that's still a lot. Isn't that the guy was rich, as in a millionaire? But I mean, he still has money. $164,000 today, a year? I mean, that's huge. So all Mrs. Bennet wants is for Mr. Bennet to go visit Mr. Bingley and just invite him to the house so he can meet one of the girls, right? And maybe one of them could marry him and just, marry up and have that fortune for her and not end up poor. But Mr. Bingley, throughout all of this, it's like, I don't know if it's that he doesn't care or that he's just indifferent. I don't understand him yet, because, I mean, Mrs. Bennet is just very preoccupied with, okay, we need to visit this new single man that has money because he can be future husband for one of our girls. And Mr. Bennet says, "How so? How can it affect them?" And Mrs. Bennet naturally says, "My dear Mr. Bennet," replied his wife, "how can you be so tiresome? You must know that I am thinking of his marrying one of them." And he says, "Is that his design in settling here?" I mean, he's just sarcastic. "Design," says Mrs. Bennet. "Nonsense! How can you talk so? But it is very likely that he may fall in love with one of them, and therefore you must visit him as soon as he comes." And then he flatters her with that, although she's, an older woman, she still has beauty. She says that when a woman has 5 grown-up daughters, she ought to give over thinking of her own beauty. As Mrs. Bennet keeps pressing him on going to visit this Mr. Bingley, Mr. Bennet says, "You are over scrupulous, surely. I dare say Mr. Bingley will be very glad to see you, and I will send a few lines by you to assure him of my hearty consent to his marrying whichever he chooses of the girls, though I must throw in a good word for my little Lizzie." Lizzie is apparently his favorite daughter, and he has no reservations about it. Mrs. Bennet is just mad because she says that she's not half as handsome as Jane and not as good-humored as Lydia. Mrs. Bennet is just frantic. She's just like chaos. Mr. Bennet's humor is just visible. He says to her, Mrs. Bennet tells him, "Mr. Bennet, how can you abuse your own children in such a way? You take delight in vexing me. You have no compassion on my poor nerves." And then he says, "You mistake me, my dear. I have high respect for your nerves. They are my old friends. I've heard you mention them with consideration this 20 years at least. I mean, I can just imagine a married couple of 2 to 3 decades. You are just so used to your partner, to your wife, that I mean, he knows her so good. He's just relaxed, man. He's chilling. Whatever his wife throws at him, she's mad with him, whatever. He's just chilling. He's just sarcastic as hell. Mr. Bennet tells his wife that if he don't visit this man, then he will visit the next one. She's even more mad at him because what's the point that 20 more men come to town if you're not gonna visit any of them? Again, Mr. Bennet, with his sarcasm, says something like, "Depend upon it, my dear, that when there are 20, I will visit them all." And just the author, which is Jane Austen, right, says, Mr. Bennet was so odd a mixture of quick parts, sarcastic humor, reserve, and caprice, that the experience of 23 years had been insufficient to make his wife understand his character. Her mind was less difficult to develop. She was a woman of mean understanding, little information, and uncertain temper. When she was discontented, she fancied herself nervous. The business of her life was to get her daughters married. Its solace was visiting and news. It's very interesting to see how this chapter ended with that chapter, because one of the things that I heard that video that motivated me to read this book is that it is necessary for men to read books like this, because Mr. Bennet can be so reserved with his emotions and thoughts that he don't understand human emotion that well, so he and his wife don't understand each other, and that's not a enjoyable way to live, you know, because you're not connecting with your wife. You're not connecting with your partner. You are just like embracing a transaction. In my opinion, people talk about these 2, 3, 4 extremes of these book and this situation, but a relationship, yes, it is a transaction, but it's not all of it, and it's not even maybe the most of it, but parts of it is a transaction. Because for example, if my wife does everything and I just sit back and relax, naturally she will be very mad. Maybe she will want a divorce because I'm not bringing anything to the table. You know what I mean? The same thing is vice versa. If I'm doing absolutely everything and she's not doing anything, then I will be mad. So yes, it's kind of a transaction, but at the same time, you want to understand human emotion and human interaction so you can share things with your partner, with your wife. And in this chapter, just by meeting for the very first time Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, which by the way, I adore them. I mean, their interaction, it's gonna be a very funny book if this continues, you know what I mean? I'm very excited just to continue reading and analyzing chapter by chapter, because I think this book has a lot to give. A lot of people regard it as one of the best literature works ever written. I'm excited to keep reading it. So please, I invite you to come with me in this journey. I will read chapter by chapter and publish it. I will try to do it every week. If you agree or if you do not agree with anything I say or the ideas or the discussion, let me know down in the comments what you think, and we'll continue from there. So with that being said, I'll just see you in the next chapter. Bye.